So just a little background about Glen Cove Hospital. It's a community hospital that's part of the North Shore Long Island Jewish Health System on Long Island, and we're nestled into the North Shore of Long Island's north coast. So we don't pull from a large area for medical patients, but we have a quite extensive orthopedic surgery department at our hospital, and we also have a rehabilitative medicine department, and we pull from pretty much the tri-state area. So our story at Glen Cove begins back in 2004, and you can see it has been evolving and continues to evolve today. Tim Hill and I became director and assistant director of pharmacy at Glen Cove in early 2004. And subsequent to that, we had pharmacy presence in patient care rounds. And one of the areas of interest where we felt we really could make a difference was in thromboprophylaxis. The hospital didn't have a formal protocol. There was really no prophylaxis going on a regular basis. And what was going on, we felt that we really could provide improvement for. So we proposed a formal program to our Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee twice within a year, and twice it was rejected. The prescribers are mostly voluntary staff. They weren't sure pharmacy could really lead something like this. And the orthopedic surgeons, there was nothing wrong with their surgery. Everything was just perfect all the time. They didn't want to really hear our proposals until we brought them the numbers. Show me the numbers. That's what they wanted. They wanted raw data. And so, being good pharmacists, we are also very resourceful. And so if that road didn't work, we took an alternate path. And we decided to do two things. We would show them the numbers, and for 1 year we collected data on every single DVT and PE that occurred in our institution, and we presented that data to every specialty within the hospital. And we gave them an anticoagulation subcommittee. So we formed a subcommittee of physician champions and pharmacy and nursing and quality champions, and we took a different road. So this is our anticoagulation subcommittee. Again, it's comprised of really multidisciplinary champions across our entire hospital. We proposed our order sheet again because we are still in a paper world at our institution, so we felt the only way to formalize and standardize our program was with an order sheet. We reproposed the order sheet to the Anticoagulation Subcommittee. We reviewed all of the guidelines and the recommendations that are available in the literature, and then we also reviewed our own data from 2005, so we knew where we had areas for improvement. And the order sheet was born. It passed Anticoagulation Subcommittee, it went through P&T and Medical Board, and it was implemented, it was available and ready to implement early in 2006. It's quite user-friendly. The top is just all the risk factors for DVT and PE, and if you look at the center of it, it just really leads the prescriber to basically order chemical prophylaxis on pretty much any patient unless they're under 40 and have no other risk factors, which is pretty much nobody in our institution. This is all based on the American College of Chest Physician guidelines. This is our current version. This was not our original version. We've made some changes to it. But initially, right off the bat, one of the things we also noticed was that about 30% of our patients who were given heparin 5000 Q12 for prophylaxis were failing therapy. And the pharmacokinetics of heparin, it's very clear that Q12 is really not sufficient, so we didn't even give them an option of Q12. If they wanted to use heparin, they would use Q8, otherwise they would order enoxaparin. And we put just one low molecular weight heparin on the formulary so that it decreased the confusion of having more than one. You can also see as we evolved, we now have a morbid obese dosing, and I'll get into that a little bit. That was one of our areas that we also identified with our annual reviews, that 30Q12 was not sufficient for patients who were morbidly obese, and we use 40Q12. And we also have a reduced dose, which is FDA guidelines for renal insufficiency. Another area too, warfarin, we found that warfarin monotherapy definitely puts the patient into a prothrombotic state, and so we've initiated bridging. And also, if we bridge for at least 4 days, and the INRs have to be greater than 2 for 2 consecutive days before the bridging is discontinued. So the Anticoagulation Subcommittee provided the order sheet. That rolled out immediately in orthopedics and rehab because those were the areas where I was physically present on a daily basis. So we immediately implemented the protocol in orthopedics and rehab in early 2006, and by the end of 2006, the numbers were quite impressive. Our rate of DVT and PE in our total joint replacement population fell by 48%, and by bridging patients coming into our rehab, our rates actually fell by 86%. Our next step, though, was to now implement this house-wide. And this was really a challenge for us because, like I said, we have a voluntary staff. Even though we had created the order sheet, it wasn't being utilized, and so the Anticoagulation Subcommittee actually made a request to hospital administration that the admitting department place the order sheet into every single chart upon patient admission, and it was required to be completed with 24 hours. And once that occurred, you'll see that everything took off from there. So since 2005, our overall rate of hospital-acquired VTE has fallen by 52%. This is across the board. Again, our medical patients was a little bit of a challenge. We finally got the order sheet placed into the chart of every patient by admitting in January of 2007, and you can see clearly the results of that. Once that was being completed on every single patient across the medical service, the rates fell by 55% and have stayed low since. Our general surgery staff was ecstatic last year. We actually hit 0%, just by being very aggressive, making sure every patient is prophylaxed. We had no DVTs or PEs in our general surgery patients. As I had mentioned, our total joint replacement program is quite large for a community hospital. We do more than 1,000 cases per year. And because we implemented directly in 2006, that's really where we saw our greatest fall. But we've remained low. We've dealt with some different patient issues over the years. We've implemented our morbid obese dosing. But I will tell you that these numbers are truly representative of our DVT rates in total joint replacement because every single total joint replacement patient is Dopplered prior to discharge. So we find symptomatic and asymptomatic and treat them. Our actual rate of symptomatic last year was only 0.8%. And I think one of our greatest attributes here is in our rehab center. We are fed rehab patients from all over the tri-state area, particularly Manhattan, as well as Long Island. Many of the patients, or I'll actually say most of the patients, arrive to us on warfarin monotherapy with subtherapeutic INRs. And so we decided to implement bridging. If the patient arrived to us with a subtherapeutic INR, they automatically went on low molecular weight heparin and stayed on it until the INR was greater than 2 for 2 days. And you can see that the rates fell by over 80%. If you follow the pharmacokinetics of warfarin, very, very clear exactly that, bridging, it makes sense in theory and in practice as well. So where did we get the most bang for our buck? You know, we've been following these patients for 6 years now. Definitely the bridging, the warfarin monotherapy was, you know, the impact was huge, and it's been confirmed now with our own data. We had found that we were starting to develop clots in patients who were morbidly obese, so we increased the dose to 40 Q12, and we're doing much better in that patient population as well. We actually have been studying where the cutoff is. Is it really 40? Because I've found over the years that patients are failing when they're more like 35, 36, 37 BMI. So we actually have data right now at a biostatistician. We had drawn 10A levels on over 700 total joint replacements over 2 years, and we're waiting for that data back now as well. Our surgeons actually use epidural analgesia postoperatively, and they generally stay on it for 2 days. But if the patient had a history of some kind of DVT or a clinical hypercoagulability, we were finding that they were failing therapy because we couldn't implement thromboprophylaxis until the catheter was pulled, and that wasn't for 48 hours. So we started having the anesthesiologist pull the catheter on post-op day 1 so we could be a little bit more aggressive in anticoagulating the patients. And in the subsequent 3 or 4 years, we actually had only 1 patient in all those years that has re-thrombosed. And that was mostly because his renal function, he was in acute renal failure. We lowered the dose. Nobody intervened when renal function improved, and that's my theory as to why that happened. And finally, we are using a little bit more aggressive dosing in patients with renal dysfunction and other comorbidities, and we are utilizing anti-factor 10A levels to guide therapy. So just in conclusion, our keys to success really have been perseverance and passion to really drive this thing, and pharmacy has been the leader in this at our institution. But finally, also, it's about empowerment of the entire clinical team, because when everybody owns it, then that's what drives it to success. Thank you very much.